So this is the Transient Designer / Shaper. It's free, it works on Windows, Mac, Linux and every DAW as VST, Clap and some other plugin formats, AU and stuff, just using plug data. So let's maybe talk a bit about what it does, how it works and stuff. We've got different modules here and they all kind of do different functions that all can be useful when you're dealing with transients. So the core of the plugin really is this transient module. Attack, speed, high cut, low cut, and I'll show you what those do in a second. You turn on a module and then you can just use the controls. Attack turns the transients up or down, all the way to -1, where basically it just removes them, all the way to 2, where there's 3 times the volume. Then you've got the speed, which is kind of the length of the transients, and this high cut and low cut, which limit the range. So if we just listen to this here. We can kind of boost the transients and then we can decrease the speed, which basically makes them longer. And these filters here are quite important. So these are basically filter the delta signal of the transient. So this attack amount only has an effect in a certain frequency range for both cuts and boosts. And this doesn't phase shift the dry signal. It only phase shifts the added or remove signal. So it's kind of like a dynamic phase type filter as opposed to like a multiband effect. So if we just listen to the delta, which is basically the difference the plugin is making, we can kind of listen to what these filters do here to the attack. So right now attack at 0, there's not going to be any delta. The plugin is neutral, and then as we turn it up, there's going to be some delta. So we can kind of limit the frequency range of what's being added. The same for what's being removed. So for example, if we want to remove transient in the high end or something like that, we could like set these filters here to focus on the high end and then remove the transients there. If we turn off the delta, of course. You can hear how it kind of dulls transients and now it's going to sharpen transients. So yeah, these filters are a really important part of what's being added exactly. They give you a lot more control over which part of the transient exactly do you want to boost or cut. The next module we're going to talk about is let's go to the harmonics. So harmonics is basically there to change the perceived loudness and the kind of harmonic density of your transients without changing the dynamics and the peak value. So this is probably best looked at on like an oscilloscope. And we can also kind of listen to it, of course. So if we turn up the harmonics here, we've got 2 different wave shaper modes, square and fold. Let's maybe move to the electronic drums because you can see this a bit better there usually. You can hear how it adds a lot of kind of punch sound-wise, but it doesn't really make them peak higher or anything. It just kind of squarifies the waveform. It's similar to what my plugin Snap does. It's just built in here and a bit more refined. And basically focus decides if it's only applied to the very first part of the sound with focus all the way up. Yeah, you can see how it kind of becomes more square-like. And then with focus down, it kind of affects more of the sound. And then there's also a fold one, which is basically a wave folding thing that mostly sounds good on kicks. This kind of thing. So we can kind of use this to add some harmonic energy to our transients. Yeah, you can see here with the lower focus, basically later parts of the wave are kind of affected as well. This is also kind of squarified, whereas with a higher focus, it's only really this very first part that's kind of affected. And you can kind of combine these to taste. If you turn these up too much and keep the focus quite low, this can sound pretty harsh and kind of ugly. So you kind of want to be a bit more subtle with these. Then we've got the body module. So this is basically, maybe switch to this break, about the decay and the release. The release is kind of the more obvious one. So it's just everything that's not a transient. So if you turn down the release all the way and turn up the speed, basically what you've got is a kind of gate for the transient. You can hear how it really only lets through the transients. And then if we turn down the speed, the gate kind of stays open for longer for the transients. So you can really be quite aggressive with this. And then if you turn release up, you kind of boost the last part of the tail of the transient, so it's kind of turning up the room a bit. And then with decay, it's kind of more about the part that comes immediately after the transient. If you've used plugins like the Kilohertz Transient Shaper or the that newfangled audio plugin, I forgot its name right now, Articulate, it's kind of got similar control, where basically it's the part just after the transient here. So if you turn this down, you get this kind of compression-like effect depending on the speed. And then if you turn it up, you can kind of boost the body of the sound, kind of make it sound longer and more full. Depending on the speed, of course. But really, what I personally use this for is really to get very sharp transients. By kind of cutting immediately after the transient, turning down the volume and then turning the transient up, you can get sort of really a very sharp sound. Especially if you turn release down, you can get like super focused transient isolation. So if we listen to this here. And then we really turn the decay down. We can get like basically absurdly sharp and sort of snappy transient sounds. So it can really, the plugin is kind of designed to be able to go to certain extremes a bit, so you can really go quite far with your sound. You can also be subtle, but it's nice to be able to really push things. And then the limiter is just really a kind of limiter clipper hybrid. It's not really just a limiter. So if you turn release down all the way to 0, you're basically dealing with a clipper. So if we drive something into the input here, is a clipper now. This is of course too much, but for demonstration's sake, you can see here. And then if we turn up release, we kind of get less distortion and more limiting. So you can see this isn't quite a square wave like anymore, but it's also a lot quieter if you turn up release. So kind of up to you what blend of limiting and clipping you want. And then aggro is kind of a special mode I came up with, where basically it turns down the release, detecting a transient, and then it turns it up when it's got more of a body. So for example, on a kick drum, it'll basically treat the transient of the kick like a clipper with a short release, but then to prevent distortion on the body, it's kind of gonna increase the release, and you're kind of gonna get you can hear it kind of, you know how the first part is kind of clipped and then the later part is limited. This is of course pushed too hard. It kind of helps preserve some of the aggression of those transients. That's the plugin really. Hope you enjoy. I'm just gonna maybe show you some more stuff here. So kind of show you how we can kind of transform like a break like this or something with this. So let's maybe push this not quite as hard. And yeah, by the way, of course, there's input gain, output gain, bypass delta, the kind of usual stuff. So let's maybe just dial in this drum break, kind of make it more snappy, more drum and bass like. First thing, I don't know, boost the transients, especially in the high end, is kind of what I'm thinking. And also limit it. Then maybe we want some harmonics to kind of add grit to the transients with a lot of focus. Keep this relatively subtle because it, you know how it sounds quite harsh on these kick drums here. So on isolated snares you can go a bit more aggressive with this, but on kick drums it's a bit... You just only want a little bit. Kind of just takes away too much of the kick otherwise. Maybe the foot. And then with the body, I don't know, we could for example make the release down and kind of really make it more snappy. to kind of clean it up a little bit. Remove some of that room, and then we can use the decay to kind of shape the body more. So if we listen to before and after. Maybe not really use the harmonics on this one, it doesn't really work. You can kind of hear how you can take your drums in a lot of different directions with this. So yeah, you can download this on my Gumroad. It's free. If you want to donate, that's always appreciated, but you don't have to. It comes with a little PDF manual. I don't know, just basically what I just told you, all these controls, kind of, if you want to look up what exactly it does, because it is a bit more of a, I guess, complex plugin, and compared to most other transient shapers, there's a few more controls, but it's really all quite straightforward stuff. So enjoy. If you're having any problems with this, let me know.